Hi, we're here at NAEMSP's 2024 annual meeting. I'm here with Dr. Haamid and Dr. Tripp. My name is Chris Capuano, and I am the Communications Director for NAEMSP. Welcome. How's it going?
Fantastic.
It's going great.
Good.
Yes, it's a wonderful week. It's a long week, but a fun week.
Exactly. Full of networking and reminiscing. So catching up with, old friends and developing new ones.
Yes. Mentorship, sponsorship here at NAMSP.
Good. So Dr. Haamid and Dr. Tripp both spoke at and led some pre-conferences earlier this week. I'd like to hear from both of you a little bit about what those pre-conferences were and how they went.
Awesome. So our DEI committee actually put on 2 pre-cons. Well, there were 3, but 2 of them we were actively involved in. The first being what used to be our anti-racism leadership pre-con. And now this year we've actually renamed it because when we went back and thought about it, we actually talked a lot more, about a lot more than just anti-racism. So it was really about building equity into EMS systems. So Dr. Tripp, why don't you tell the title?
Oh, no problem. So the title, Empowering Leadership, Building Equity and Excellence into EMS Systems. And so what we wanted to focus on is really the health equity part of it. And that's really addressing the disparities and equities when it comes to patient care, implicit bias, microaggressions, how that affects even the work environment, and also addressing the diversity in workforce, how we have a lack of that currently today and hasn't really changed over the last decade, correct?
Correct.
So that's why we're trying to build those tools and strategies to really influence people to have the understanding about what the issues are, the root causes, and then how we can focus on the solutions and build upon those.
That's right. And then, of course, participants, they actually leave with resources as it relates to social determinants of health, how to be an interrupter or an upstander from an excellent training from Dr. Tripp, our upstander training. You see our badge here. But how do you interrupt when you see those cases of bias, when you see those cases of discrimination, when patient care is being affected or a colleague is being harmed in some way? You know, a lot of us don't use our voices to speak up because we think we're not going to be heard or whatever we say may not be welcome. But it's really upon us to make the culture a bit better for all. So people leave with these resources. Another resource that they got this year, which was a special treat, is how do we do quality assessment, quality improvement? How do we do that and think about equity? How do we build equity into those processes? So we heard from Dr. Rickquel Tripp. We have a wonderful list of instructors in that pre-con. Dr. Rickquel Tripp took us through research, improvement science, implementation science, and then we ended with actually doing a driver diagram, figuring out how it is that we can improve pain management in the pre-hospital setting. So it's a wonderful pre-con. I do highly recommend.
Yes.
The second pre-con we were involved in is the Women in EMS and DEI Leadership Pre-con, because when we look at ourselves as women, when we look at ourselves as people who are championing equity and diversity in our spaces, we meet certain challenges that our counterparts just don't meet. So we need a little bit of focused training. We need a little bit of focused education and a focused mentorship. So we actually brought in Ann Libby. She's a professor. She is a professor at University of Colorado. They call it CU. Okay, they call it CU, not UC. She's at University of Colorado. She came in actually to do mission, visions, values with us and help to structure our elevator pitch and talking to us about how it's much more than just an elevator pitch. How do we talk to people and within 10 seconds, you know exactly, why it is that I'm doing the work that I'm doing and how you can leave a memorable piece of yourself with the other person. So that was the first part of that Women in EMS pre-com. And then we finished up with negotiation skills and then also how to manage difficult situations. And again, those participants left with tips, tricks, and actual tactical things that they can use in their spaces to get that promotion that you deserve. Okay, you deserve that.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like they both went really well, and I also saw that later this week on Friday you will also be co-presenting a session that is also related to DEI. So can you tell me a bit about what participants might expect from that session?
Oh, sure, no problem. So I will say, as you can see, dynamic duo. We like to do things was empowerment with numbers. And so on Friday we're going to be talking about how implicit bias really affects the care and really how to provide equitable care to patients and understanding what the recent EMS cases that have come when we're looking at Tyree Nichols, looking at Elijah McClain, looking at Earl Moore Jr., and trying to understand and really dive into how did these things happen. and understanding that a lot of it was based upon the biases people had that had the influence upon their attitudes, their behavior, and how they decided to treat that patient. And then also focusing on how we can be an upstander in that situation if people are leading us into a way that can be harmful to the patient, for us to have the courage and the strength to stand up and basically stop that, be an obstruction to a harm that's going to be happening. And I think sometimes we don't have that strength at times, where we're afraid because of the mentality of the group theory. But however, trying to really understand as an individual, it only takes one voice. Similar to like when you're looking at crew resource management, it only takes one person to say, you know what, we can't fly. And having that understanding and that just cause nature of, if someone makes a mistake, let's learn about it, let's remediate. And then also to make sure that when we're building this, change of culture, we understand what is our actual power. So what are the things that we have where people think like, oh, you know what, I'm just low, on this level or this hierarchy, I can't really do anything. But having that realization that you can do something. So understanding your value and your worth when it comes to those things, to interrupt those things before they lead to the unfortunate death of that patient.
Yeah. And I think this talk is also going to highlight a couple of key takeaways from some of the research, some of the literature that's already been produced that shows health disparities in the pre-hospital space. So people, commonly say, well, I don't know what gaps exist. I don't know where the disparities are. Well, that's because you haven't looked. And we've looked for you. So don't worry. Okay. We have some national data for you. But also you need to look into your EMS systems as well, because these biases, we see them playing out on the big screen, on our news channels. However, they're happening right in front of us, in day-to-day patient care. So you'll leave with an understanding of some of the disparities that exist in the pre-hospital space, so you can take that information back to your EMS system so that you can build a more equitable system for your patients.
And I will say that also you can always contact us for any additional. I will say that unfortunately sometimes it's trying to fit and jam pack everything in a concentrated 25 minutes gives you the surface of what you can do. So definitely feel free to reach out to either of us so that we can really dive deeper into that, especially with your EMS agency. Because again, one EMS agency is
one EMS agency.
That's right. Exactly. So sometimes you have to customize for your own EMS agency, and that's where we are offering, our expertise to help all of you into that.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, I know 25 minutes isn't that long, but it sounds like you two are going to be filling it up pretty well.
Yes, that's exactly
right. Yes.
And the last thing I want to ask you both about, Dr. Tripp, you're former vice chair of the DEI committee, and Ameera, you are a current co-chair. So I'd like to ask you both about what work you have been doing in the past, and what some of the work that you are looking to do in the immediate and maybe long-term future as well.
Sure, no problem. Well, I'll start off with the beginning, because we then pass this baton for the legacy. So, so I will say in the beginning, where we were formed in 2020, Dr. Sylvia Usuanta and myself, we basically were like, you know what, there really is no DI anything with EMS, and recognizing, especially me in Pittsburgh, and recognizing the Freedom House Ambulance Incorporated, the foundation of how we actually practice EMS today. And a little, keynote speaker on Thursday, Chief Moon, who was one of the original Freedom House Ambulance workers, paramedics, so who's going to be speaking. So just putting a little plug in there. But recognizing that history, we really wanted to focus on, we need to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, sense of belonging, and justice within EMS. And so we got together. I was the vice chair. Dr. Sylvia Usuanta was the chair. And so we really started to form two groups, more with a research group and more those looking at policy, because we needed to build a foundation. So that's where position statements we're having. We have scoping reviews with disparities, with diversity in workforce, for that to be propagated. And then once we were to build that and make sure that we even became a committee, because we were a task force first, and really within that 2-year period, we actually became a committee, and we have over like 50 members within the DI committee. And so then, of course, I was like, Ameera, don't you want to be the chair of the DEI committee. And then now I'm going to pass it over to Ameera of taking hold of that fantastic throne.
Yes. So really great leadership starting out. And I appreciate the mentorship, sponsorship that we get from this committee. Our committee is very strong. You know, I can say I'm super proud of all the work that we do. We are a committee that gets work done. Our committee is further divided into 4 different subcommittees. So we have our advocacy policy subcommittee, we have our research subcommittee, we have our education subcommittee, and then we have our recruitment and retention. So far, what we've done for the research subcommittee is these 2 scoping reviews that we published in end of 2021. Currently, we're working on 2 papers related to limited English proficiency in the pre-hospital space. So that's what our research is focused on now. Hopefully, we'll have a publication for you soon, within the next year or so. For our advocacy and policy, there is something very exciting happening that was born out of our committee on a federal level, but I think it's embargoed at this moment and I cannot tell you. But be on the lookout. Something really incredible is happening and we're very excited about that, but that's from, you know, the ground root efforts of this committee. Furthermore, in our advocacy policy committee, we're working on 2 position statements that we're hoping that are going to be published this year. We're hoping. And those 2 position statements relate to transgender care and gender nonconforming care in the pre-hospital space, because we simply just do not get enough education there. So we put together a position statement and a resource document, and that's currently under review. The other document we're working on is in relation with our quality committee. How do we actually build equity into EMS systems? How do we do that QA/QI process and think about those health disparities while we're doing that? And how do we elucidate those? So the committee has been working really hard with that quality committee to get those documents together, and that's submitted and that's under review. The other thing that we're working on as far as recruitment and retention, well, we are never not recruiting. So if you want to join the committee, come on down. We're always doing academic work. We're always doing really innovative ground, earth-shattering work as it relates to EMS. And then lastly, for our education committee, what we're hoping to do this year is actually there's already been a textbook chapter written already by Dr. Sylvia Owusu-Ansah and Dr. Rickquel Tripp. However, we want to expand that. We actually want a section in the textbook because I think that there's so much information that we've kind of elucidated already. There's so much information to be learned and to be shared, information that's being shared right now in the medical director's course, but that information is not in our textbook, okay? So we would really love to get a section in our textbook to talk about social determinants of health in EMS and how are we tracking those and what are we doing with that information? Health disparities in EMS, what do those look like? And what do we do about that? What about pipeline programming? What does that look like? What works? What doesn't work? We need to summarize that information and give it to people so that they can go ahead and use that information to build, healthier EMS systems for our patients and for the workforce. So that's what we're doing right now. There are a couple of other things.
Just a few things.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Oh, and then don't forget about talking about the implicit bias training for EMS, because with the NAEMSP education standards in 2021, implicit bias training is now one of the requirements. And so one of the things, especially that are led by my lovely Ameera and myself, we've been going to different EMS agencies and giving EMS bias training and then collecting data to see how is that happening, and then how we can now try to structure it so they can be packaged to be able to be transferable to other agencies. So for that teaching. So that's the other thing that, we're doing for the education and training.
Right, yeah. So, unconscious bias, implicit bias, and also cultural humility. So all of those packaged together, I mean, we really need to be talking about that. And I know that people, a lot of people have hesitancy. They're a little bit hesitant to talk about bias because you don't want to offend people. However, on the flip side, there are people that are dying from unconscious bias impacting patient care decisions. People are being transported to facilities where they shouldn't have been transported, or people are given 8 milligrams of Narcan before considering other alternatives such as intracranial hemorrhage as it relates to the patient's presentation, and that can be absolutely life-changing for a patient. But these are cases that we see every day in our emergency department. It doesn't mean that our EMS providers are, bad people or anything like that. All of us have unconscious bias. All of us, are augmenting the decisions that we're making for our patients based on our own bias. But the only way to combat that is to talk about it.
And
we
to
can't,
acknowledge it.
yeah, we can't keep sweeping it under the rug or say it's too uncomfortable for us to talk about. We really do need to address it head on. We need to do it right, So hopefully, from the information and the surveys and the data that we're collecting, we're able to find a solution or find something that works well with an EMS system. So we're currently doing it in Chicago. Dr. Tripp is currently doing it in Pittsburgh. So, we'll see what the results are, and maybe you'll see us next year on the stage talking about the unconscious bias training.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, maybe.
I
Yeah.
know, right? There you go.
Maybe.
Tag team back again.
Okay.
Check it.
Well, like you said, just a little bit of work that the committee's doing,
Yeah,
but
yes,
it
yes.
sounds
Love
like
it, love it,
you
just
can
love
use
it.
all the help that you can get, and you said you're always recruiting. So if anyone did want to join the DEI committee, how would they get involved?
Oh, yeah. So the NAEMSP website actually has myself listed and Dr. Anjani Joyner, who is our co-chair, as you mentioned earlier. And you can reach out to either Dr. Joyner or myself to join the DEI committee. Furthermore, we also have our own, private website that was linked on our website. Just had an overhaul. It looks nice. It's very pretty. Whoever did that, great job. However, that link to our own, specialized website did fall off, so we'll have to contact someone to put it back on.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Because it has a lot of resources. All the pipeline programs are up there. It has it's an incredibly resource-rich document or webpage put together by our own David Page. David Tripp. But these one of our members put it together, and it's incredible. And at the very end, there is a link that you can click and actually put in your information so that I can serially refresh. I check it about once every 1 to 2 months. I'll go on and say, hey, who signed up to become a part of the committee? And I'll bring you into the fold, and you'll start getting hammered with all these base camp emails. So prepare yourself.
And I will also say that we also have a WhatsApp. So, so different forms of communication so that we can all link together. Because I will say that when you're in, especially the DEI space and work, that sometimes you may feel that you're alone. And that's one of the reasons why we focus on trying to build that community of networking and mentorship so that if you're having a certain situation, you bring that to the committee, we have different suggestions or strategies or things. And sometimes even you can invite us to come to some of those EMS agencies because it's interesting how when an outsider comes in, people may be more willing to listen compared to when you are within it. But then that just plants the seed for the great work that continues to be done. So just wanted to make sure that the plug-in for the WhatsApp was up and with the website. But definitely I would say that we're also very welcome for any new ideas. So any new things that you want to bring to the table. We recently from the pre-conference had a new idea really addressing abilities and disabilities and how we can look at EMS, anyone that wants to be a paramedic or an EMT that has a disability, how can we have a better way of incorporating them into our EMS systems? And so that's one idea that just brought up that is going to now be onto the table. So, yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for that fantastic overview of everything you both have going on. It's obvious that you're both extremely busy, so I'll let you get back to it. I hope you both have a great time at the rest of the conference and with everything else you've got going on with NAEMSP.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for this incredible opportunity so we can share everything to everyone about what the great accomplishments that especially my lovely Ameera is doing.
Yes. I think that people watching this will be like, oh, they seem like they're best friends. But honestly, I met Ricky through the committee. And
3 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, when the committee was 2020, summer 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
And I would say that all of our committee is very close. If you're active in our committee, we're all very close. We keep in constant contact with each other. We provide mentorship for each other. We provide sponsorship for each other. And I think that's just like the strength of our committee. It's very, family focused and community focused. So join us.
Yeah, exactly. And then recently I just came to Chicago. I was bowling with Ameera.
So
I will say that also, when you're going to a different, location and, one of our members are there, like we are all about hosting and getting and meeting up with you so we can have that interpersonal interaction. So that's I will say, we killed it with that bowling. We did.
Can't do the work alone.
Well, Dr. Tripp, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.